Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here and welcome back. In today's video, we are going to be using some flower sets I have in bloom, and I also have the new stamp set, More Rustic Wildflowers. And I'm going to use these both together to create some holiday wreaths on some card designs. I love flower stamps that like this that kind of have a bunch of different designs. They have a whole bunch of flowers and a whole bunch of leaf patterns. And I love that they have solid stamping so that I can kind of mix and match everything here and create a really cool wreath effect and use a bunch of different colors. So that's kind of what I really love the most about this technique, is that you can really mix up the colors that you use and kind of do anything you want. You can stay completely traditional. You can just use greens with a little bit of red. You can use pinks and aquas if that's what you prefer. It's just a great way to kind of use your stamps for the holidays, even though they are meant to be flower and leaf images. The first thing I'm doing is I have a piece of cardstock here, and this measures 4 inches square, and I'm just finding the very center of this cardstock panel. I'm going to use a compass to draw my circle, and I just want to make sure I have the center of the square before I start to draw the circle. Now, if you don't have a compass, you can just use a circle die cut and kind of trace around it. You can use a circle shape, so a circle bottle that you kind of have in your house, and just kind of put that on top. And this is just going to be a guide for us to do our stamping. And if you're really great at it and you don't even need the circle, then absolutely just go ahead and free stamp it. But I know me, and I know that I'm going to end up with an oval or possibly a square if I try and stamp this without having that circle to kind of guide me. So I have pulled out a bunch of my MFT dye inks. I have mainly greens and aqua type colors. And then I've also included cement gray and grout gray. I don't think I ended up using the grout gray at all. It was a little bit too light for what I wanted. But the cement gray worked perfectly to kind of add one more color in there that's not just the greens and the aquas. So when I do a wreath stamped like this, what I like to do is take my first image, and I like to stamp in threes. So I'll stamp the image 3 times with the same color, and I try and space them kind of exactly apart on the circle. This time that didn't really go as planned, and I ended up with quite a bit of space between the first 2 compared to that third one that I added. So I will kind of adjust for that a little bit later because my other leaf images won't fit exactly how I wanted them to. So you can see that one there, the second one I stamped in the green, has a lot of space around it. So I just keep picking out a different greenery stamp, and then I change up the ink. So I did cement gray, limelight. Now I'm using sour apple, and you can see there I actually stamped that one 4 times to kind of make up for that space that I have there. And once we're done all of the stamping, you're never going to notice that I have a little bit of a boo-boo, and I ended up only using 2 of one stamp and 4 of the other. So I ended up kind of mixing it up a tiny bit. Now to add some darker color in there, I used both of those leaf images and used Tropical Teal and Green-Eyed Monster. And now I'm taking this kind of different looking, it's meant to have flowers actually on top of it, but I'm just using it on its own and adding that into some of the openings to kind of fill the wreath in. And I use Blue Raspberry to do that. Now I've switched over to the More Rustic Wildflower stamp set, and I have this kind of twiggy looking stamp. It just has the little branch pieces coming off of it. And this is a great one to use as filler since it's really thin. It doesn't have a lot of detail, so it really fills in those spaces nicely. And I decided to stamp that one with the same cement gray. Now to add my little berries, I have this stamp in the More Rustic Wildflowers that has a bunch of little circles on it. And if you are very careful and just stamp the one side of it, you can actually stamp 3 berries at a time. So I'm using this one here with Cranberry Cocktail ink. And I'm just kind of being careful, only putting the section of the stamp that I want to actually stamp onto my ink pad. And then I am stamping this all around the wreath to add little holly berries. Now I always like to do a uneven number, so I ended up stamping, I think, 9 of these. At first I was going to go with a little bit less and do 5, but I feel like more is better in this type of a design because the red really makes the colors in the wreath pop, and it really gives it that holiday feel. And as you're looking at this now, you can see that the middle kind of looks a little crazy, but we're not going to worry about that because I already know going into this that I was going to cover the center area with a circle die cut. But if you prefer and don't want to add any type of die cut over top, then you can definitely create a circle mask before you do your stamping, and that will prevent the center area from looking all messy. So now I have everything stamped here. You can see I have a nicely shaped wreath. It's not perfectly circle, but I feel like it's a wreath, so it's not really supposed to be. As long as it has the basic design and kind of looks like it's round, then I think it works really nice. So for the center area, like I mentioned, I'm going to use a die cut circle. So I have the hand-lettered holiday stamp set, and I'm going to use the Merry and Bright sentiment. And I have die cut a circle from the Stitched Circle Stacks from white cardstock. So I'm going to use some black licorice dye ink and I'm going to stamp the sentiment directly onto the circle. And you can see when I do the stamping, the sentiment is much too large for the actual circle shape, but I am really loving the look of having a sentiment kind of go off of the edges of the sentiment piece that I'm using. So whether it be a sentiment strip or a circle like I have in this case, I really like the look of having that word kind of going off of each side of that circle. I'm using a tropical teal piece of cardstock to create my card base, and that is cut at 4 1/4 inches by 8 1/2, and then I've scored it in half and folded it to create a nicely sized square card that fits nicely behind our panel. Now for the sentiment, I decided I wanted to add a little bit of vellum underneath of it, so I cut out a piece of vellum slightly larger than the sentiment circle, and now I'm using some craft foam to add to the back of my main sentiment circle so I can have a little bit of dimension on this. So I'm just adhering this directly on the back there, and then I'm going to add some additional adhesive so that I can add this to the vellum piece. I didn't want the vellum piece to actually have any kind of dimension. I want that flat against the wreath, and then I want my sentiment circle to be raised off of that. So once I added it to the vellum, I just added adhesive to the entire piece, and now I'm going to position this right into the center of my wreath. And you just want to make sure that you have your sentiment nice and straight. It is a little bit hard sometimes when you're using a circle element like this, but I find the grid on my grid mat really helps to kind of line that up and make sure I have it straight. I'm using Nuvo Crystal Glaze, and I'm adding some little drops of this on top of all of the berries that you can still see that aren't kind of hidden underneath of the vellum. And this is just going to give them a nice clear shiny finish and kind of give them a little bit of dimension so they look a little bit more realistic. And I really love the look of that on top of all of the stamping that we've done. I'm also adding some clear gems to the circle area in the center just because I felt like it had a lot of white space and needed just a little bit of detail added. And then once I have those adhered, the card is finished. Now I also have another card that I created I'm going to share here quick, which is the exact same idea. I've created another wreath on this card. This time when I did the wreath though, I did it a little bit smaller so it's more contained in the center area of the card. I used a cranberry cocktail card base rather than the tropical teal, and I changed up the sentiment in the center and left off the vellum. So these are the two examples using different flower and greenery stamps to create holiday wreaths. I really hope you enjoyed today's video and we'll give this a try. It's a lot of fun to create the wreaths with stamps that you already have in your stash. And like I said earlier, you can get really creative with the colors and the different stamps that you use to create the wreath. So thanks so much for watching. As always, I appreciate you being here and I will see you in another video soon.